Just how cheap should you be able to afford a budget Porsche for under 5 digits? Well, according to the internet, you need to have quite a bit of money if you're buying a used one versus having a new one because you should be able to afford the running costs and the issues. Well, on cheap cars, I like doing budgets. So, what are these budget Porsches that I speak of, and can you afford one? It sounds like you can for the most part and the majority of people, but do you want to run it? In this video, that is the question I'm going to ask, and let's look at some great cars, in most cases under 5 digits. If you like great car content and you want it weekly and you want to find out what's going on in the car world, then don't forget to subscribe to myself because I make weekly car content. Of course, only if you want to. Having been around since about 2003, the Porsche Cayman is probably a really good place to start when it comes to budget Porsches, given its depreciation in that time. And people have probably forgotten about this car, given that it's not really something the average person might look at, just because it's a Porsche and the running costs of an SUV are pretty high for the most part. Now, yes, it does have a 4.6 litre engine, but I found these at a really good budget, which I'll show at the end of this segment. Porsches did have a bit of a relift and facelift of this Cayenne at the time, and it was a lot better for it. It definitely benefited. But it was the first V8 engine built by Porsche, and in 2003, people were a bit skeptical. There was a study done by Harvard and Business Cases that people really disliked this initial Porsche Cayenne. It would ruin the brand, and that a lot of people really did not like this idea of sporty utility vehicles coming into the market. Well, Porsche Cayenne kind of changed that, and yes, in 2003 people were conscious about the climate, but with a 4.5 litre V8 it did seem almost crazy, and at the time these cars cost close to maybe £70,000 for a top end model. Here you can get one for £2,500, and believe it or not, Porsche Cayennes are relatively reliable for what they are.
Wow.
They're actually pretty good cars, and a lot of people have really praised them, despite being expensive to run, which I get are two different things. Engines come with a 3.2 to a 4.8 litre, and you'll have a lot of fun on a super tight, nice budget of £2,000. Yes, make sure it's running though. If you're looking for a more sporty car from Porsche, then why not look no further than the 944. From 1982 to 1991, it was a front-engine, rear-wheel drive, mid-level sports car. And in this time, they sold 163,000 of them, and it was Porsche's most successful car in history, aside from the Boxster and 997 Carrera. The Porsche 944 is a car that I really like because it's got a sort of wide body, and they are super cheap now. Yes, that is for good reason, I admit, but it's still really affordable for people who kind of want a retro 80s sports car, which I think it really fits the bill quite well. It was a cheap when Top Gear did it and created it into the ambulance, and it still is today at only £3,500, which I don't think anyone really can complain about. If you go back to 1976, you'll actually find the Porsche 924, which technically, yes, is the same car as the 944. The difference is the engine mounting in these two cars. One's slightly smaller and thinner on the road, and one's wider with a bigger body kit. But the 924s all had installed engines which were water cooled, and this made them fairly reliable. Again, with the 924, they were pretty good cars. Yes, there are some issues with them today if you're going to pick one up, and that is it's really old and the bodywork and rust has really eaten them away. Surprisingly, there are still some on the road. Now, I was looking at some of them online, and they really are poor condition. If you might remember Top Gear, again, when they bought the 924 for a challenge, it was cheap then, and it's still cheap now. But if you could find a good one, I reckon you could pay still under 5 digits. Some of them are really beautiful looking cars. I really like these examples. They're just kind of nice, affordable little Porsches to own. Here's one for £4,000. Pretty much all of them came with a 2 to 2.5 litre, and again, similarly to the 944, they were just very similarly made, so it had great reliability throughout. Now that those two cars are out of the way, let's get back to number 3, and it is the Porsche Cayman. I wasn't going to include this initially because they were still holding a good value, but they are at the same time great cars for good value. Now, when I looked at these back in 2005 and 2006, it seemed like an odd and for many people strange to fit into the family where it does. It sits between the Boxster and the 911, and so it has this weird look if you've never really seen the Cayman or knew what it was. Although I kind of liked it for some of the sporty models. I just liked the design and look of it. It wasn't convertible, so it had a nice kind of coupe look, but it also looked like a 911. Weirdly enough, Porsche has some issues with the Cayman in that it's A, not named after the Cayman Islands, and B, had Crocs have an issue with a lawsuit based on the name of one of their shoes, which is just weird. The Cayman was brought about back in 2005, and it's still in production today, but it's really modernized and it's got such boot space. That engine is so mid-engine that it's very difficult to repair and replace issues when needed. The car isn't the best, but what I've seen people say about it, as you can see in the reliability in driving and owning of this car, is great. You can't deny that this car would be an excellent owner for people who are looking for a car. Unfortunately, the cheapest one I could find on Auto Trader was £11,000. The next Porsche on this list is one that I don't really like that much, and it is the Panamera. Released in 2009, it is a car that is different from everything else on this list, and one that probably a lot of people will avoid. And this is, again, a different kind of car. You could almost class it as a family car, but a lot of people probably won't want to run it based on running issues and costs. To buy, it's fairly cheap. Think about this depreciation. Someone would have bought one of these for £80,000 back in the day, and they are now worth around 10, maybe 15 for a bad one. Interior was beautiful. Yes, they've upgraded it a lot since the new models, but back in 2009, this was a 4.8 litre twin-turbo V8 powered car, and it was pretty cool. It was kind of unique in its sense. It did get eaten up a lot by the rappers who decided to modify it to horrific ends. With these standard and upgraded versions, they were good cars and were reliable for the time. Like I said, it came with a 3 litre V6 or a 4 litre V8, which is kind of crazy for what is a 4-door car, for what people might consider a businessman. And since then, they've gone on to do the Panamera in hybrid versions, and they're a lot better than they ever were. So it's still an option for people looking for a budget luxury. When most people think of budget Porsche, they're probably going to go to the Boxster. Yes, I've saved the best to last, my favourite car on the list, and probably your favourite car, because these are incredibly cheap at the moment, and we all know affordable to run for the most part, but it's a bit of a headache to fix on certain parts. The Porsche Boxster was first released in 1996, powered by a 2.5 litre flat 6 engine, and you still see a lot of the original Boxsters because this design was so popular. It was upgraded to a 2.7 in 2007, and then the Boxster S again came out after that with a 3.2 litre. These hold a bit more value, but the Boxster in general is a pretty good budget Porsche. I've seen some for as little as £4,000. Now, yes, you might get a dog, so you're probably looking at maybe a 5 to 6 for a better one, but I still think they really hold well. Don't forget, these are great handling cars, and they will last for as long as you service them, like any car. But the Boxster was sort of the first of its kind after having 911 for many years in Porsche's life. So it's really changed since then, and it's become a modern car that everyone still loves, and will probably continue to be here for a very long time with a lot of dealerships to help service you. Hope you've enjoyed this Cars with Ben video. Don't forget to subscribe if you like car content.